The email from HR arrived at exactly 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Everyone else received congratulatory messages about our company's upcoming IPO. I received a meeting invitation with my boss for 4:30 p.m. that same day. I knew what it meant before I even walked into that glass-walled conference room. I'd been at Helios Tech for 7 years, longer than anyone else on my team. And I had a sixth sense for corporate disasters, especially when they involved me. What I didn't expect was to see Jessica sitting there, 23 years old with a smile that screamed both sympathy and triumph. Her MacBook adorned with stickers from music festivals I was now too old to attend. My former intern. My replacement. Some people believe karma eventually balances the scales. I don't wait for karma. I engineer it. My name is Amelia Zhao. And this is how I dismantled the company that betrayed me. Not with a resignation letter, but with calculated precision during the most critical 72 hours of their existence. Day. Amelia, thanks for coming in. Derek Wellington, VP of Product Development and my boss for the last 4 years, didn't stand when I entered. He remained seated beside Jessica, both of them on one side of the table, a united front. Please, have a seat. I chose the chair directly across from him rather than at the end of the table. Power positioning. Small victories matter when you're about to be ambushed. We wanted to talk to you about some organizational changes happening at Helios. Derek began, his voice carrying that artificial warmth executives practice in leadership seminars. As you know, with the IPO approaching, we've been evaluating our team structure to ensure we're positioned for aggressive growth. I nodded, face neutral. Years of poker nights with my brother had taught me how to mask emotions when necessary. Of course, growth is essential. Exactly. And sometimes growth requires fresh perspectives and new approaches. He glanced at Jessica, who smiled on cue. Which is why we've decided to restructure the product strategy division. Here it comes. Jessica will be stepping into the director role, overseeing the entire product roadmap as we move into our public phase. The role I had been promised, the role I had essentially been doing for the past 2 years without the title or compensation. The role now being handed to someone who had been making coffee runs and scheduling meetings just 18 months ago. I'll be reporting to Jessica? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Derek shifted in his seat. Not exactly. We'd like you to transition to a senior product advisor position. You'd be leveraging your historical knowledge of our systems to support Jessica's vision. Same compensation package, but with more flexibility. Same pay, no team, no authority, no advancement path. A glorified consultant being phased out. A position created solely to avoid the appearance of demotion while they slowly pushed me toward the exit. I see. I looked at Jessica, who had the decency to appear slightly uncomfortable. Congratulations, Jessica. That's quite an achievement. Thank you, Amelia. I'm really excited about where we can take the product, and I'm counting on your expertise. No one knows Helios like you do. That, at least, was true. No one knew Helios like I did, including all its vulnerabilities, backdoors, and secrets. Derek slid a folder across the table. HR has prepared a transition document outlining the new structure. Your new role begins immediately. We'd like you to start briefing Jessica on all active projects tomorrow. I placed my hand on the folder without opening it. What prompted this restructuring decision? Derek's smile tightened. Jessica has shown exceptional leadership potential and innovative thinking. The board feels her approach aligns perfectly with our vision for post-IPO expansion. Translation. Jessica was younger, cheaper despite her new title, more willing to be molded by executive whims, and, though no one would say it, presented a better image for investor meetings than a woman approaching 40. And the fact that Jessica's uncle sits on the board had nothing to do with this decision. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jessica's eyes widened slightly. She thought I didn't know about her connection to Lawrence Keller, one of Helios's earliest investors. I had made it my business to know everything about everyone at this company. That's an inappropriate suggestion. Amelia, Derek said, his friendly facade cracking. The decision was based entirely on merit and strategic direction. I stood, taking the folder with me. Thank you for the clarity. I'll review these materials and begin preparing transition documents for Jessica. Derek seemed relieved at my apparent acceptance. Great. I know this is a big change, but I'm confident you'll continue to be a valuable asset to Helios. Asset, not leader, not visionary, asset. I smiled. I always aim to provide exactly what Helios deserves. I didn't go back to my desk after the meeting. Instead, I took the elevator to the 32nd floor, executive territory, and walked directly to the office of Meera Patel, Chief Technology Officer and the only executive who had consistently recognized my contributions. Her assistant tried to intercept me, but I moved past him with the confidence of someone who belonged. It's urgent, Colin. She'll want to see me. Meera was on a call when I entered, but she waved me in and wrapped up quickly when she saw my expression. Amelia, what's happened? She removed her glasses, concern evident in her eyes. I placed the HR folder on her desk. They're promoting Jessica Winters to Director of Product Strategy. I'm being moved to an advisory role with no team and no future. Meera's expression shifted from surprise to anger to calculation in the span of seconds. Sit down. She pressed the intercom. Colin, hold all my calls for the next 30 minutes. She opened the folder, scanning the contents quickly. This is Derek's doing. The timing, just before the IPO roadshow begins. She shook her head. It's opportunistic and short-sighted. Jessica's uncle is Lawrence Keller. I know, Meera said, but I didn't think even Derek would be this obvious about it. She closed the folder. I can speak to Marcus about this. Marcus Chen was our CEO, brilliant with technology but increasingly removed from day-to-day operations as the company had grown. Don't, I said. If I'm going to stay at Helios, it needs to be on merit, not intervention. You've earned your place here 100 times over. Amelia. The Nexus platform exists because of you. The entire UX architecture that investors are so excited about was your vision. I nodded. And yet here we are. Meera studied me. What are you planning to do? I haven't decided yet. A lie. I had started formulating plans the moment Derek had said Jessica will be stepping into the director role. Don't make any hasty decisions. The IPO is in 3 weeks. Once we're public, there will be a reorganization anyway. This might be temporary. Perhaps. Another lie. Nothing about this was temporary. I'd seen this pattern before at my previous company, the gradual sidelining of experienced employees in favor of cheaper, more compliant alternatives. Thank you for your time, Meera. She stood as I did. Amelia, I mean it. Don't do anything impulsive. We need you here. Apparently not as much as you need Jessica, I replied, and left before she could respond. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking the city, laptop open, a glass of Macallan 18 beside me. On the screen was a blank resignation letter. The cursor blinked, waiting. I had options. I could. 1. Accept the demotion. Bide my time and look for another job. 2. Resign immediately in protest. 3. Take the nuclear option. The first would be sensible but unsatisfying. The second would be emotionally gratifying but professionally risky. The third would require careful planning. I closed the resignation draft and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, Helios vulnerabilities and contingencies. After 7 years, I knew where all the bodies were buried. Figuratively speaking, of course, I knew which features had been rushed and contained technical debt. I knew which security protocols had been temporarily bypassed to meet deadlines. I knew which customer complaints had been buried rather than addressed. Most importantly, I knew what would happen if these things came to light at precisely the wrong moment. The IPO was scheduled for July 15th, with the roadshow beginning next week. Potential investors would be scrutinizing everything about Helios, its technology, its leadership, its future prospects. Timing would be everything. I took a sip of whiskey and began typing. By midnight, I had a comprehensive inventory of Helios's vulnerabilities. By 2 a.m., I had a timeline. By 4 a.m., I had a plan that would either destroy my career or deliver the most satisfying revenge of my life. I finally went to bed as the sun was rising, sleeping dreamlessly for 3 hours before my alarm woke me for what would be one of my final days at Helios Tech. Amelia, do you have a minute? Jessica caught me at the coffee machine the next morning. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her company ID badge. Of course, Director Winters, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. She winced. Please don't. This is awkward enough already. I leaned against the counter, cradling my coffee. What can I help you with? I wanted to talk about the transition. I know this isn't what you expected, and I want to make it as smooth as possible. That's thoughtful of you. Jessica lowered her voice. For what it's worth, I didn't ask for this. They approached me about the position last month. Last month, while I was working 14-hour days finalizing the product roadmap for the IPO presentation, they had already decided to replace me. It's just business, Jessica. No hard feelings. I took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim of my mug. Really? Relief flooded her face. I was worried you'd hate me. Hate is unproductive. I prefer to channel my energy in more constructive ways. That's why everyone respects you so much, she said earnestly. Your professionalism. If only she knew. I've prepared some transition documents for you. They're in a shared folder. We should review them together when you have time. Absolutely. How about this afternoon? I have meetings until 2. 3 o'clock works for me. Your office or mine? I asked, knowing full well that she would be moving into my office eventually. She hesitated. The main conference room might be better. More space for the materials. Perfect, I'll set it up. As Jessica walked away, I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Step 1 of my plan was already in motion. The transition meeting with Jessica went exactly as I had anticipated. She was eager, attentive, and completely overwhelmed by the complexity of what she was inheriting. This is a lot, she said, staring at the product architecture diagrams I had prepared. I had no idea the system was so intricate. 7 years of development tends to create complexity, I replied. But don't worry, I've simplified it as much as possible for the handover. What I didn't tell her was that my simplified documentation strategically omitted critical connections and dependencies. Nothing that would cause immediate problems, but enough to ensure that when things eventually broke, she wouldn't understand why. The IPO presentation deck mentions the Nexus API integration. Can you walk me through how that works again? I want to make sure I can answer any investor questions confidently. I spent the next hour explaining the Nexus platform in excruciating technical detail, watching her eyes glaze over as I deliberately overloaded her with information. By the end of our 3-hour session, her notebook was filled with fragmented notes, and her confidence had visibly diminished. We should continue this tomorrow, I suggested, gathering my materials. There's still the customer feedback system and the product analytics framework to cover. Jessica nodded, looking slightly dazed. Yes, definitely. Thank you for being so thorough. Amelia. Just doing my job, for now. The slight emphasis I placed on the last words wasn't lost on her. A flash of worry crossed her face before she composed herself. Same time tomorrow? Actually, I have some meetings in the morning. How about we start at 1 p.m. and work through the afternoon? That works, she agreed, already checking her phone for messages. The burden of leadership was settling on her shoulders, and I had only begun to add weight. After leaving Jessica, I made my way to the development floor, where the engineering teams worked. I needed to set the next phase of my plan in motion, and for that, I needed Noah Reeves. Noah was Helios's most talented developer and, conveniently, someone who owed me a significant favor. 2 years ago, I had covered for him when a mistake in his code had nearly cost us a major client. I had taken responsibility, absorbed the executive team's anger, and then quietly helped him fix the issue. He hadn't forgotten. I found him hunched over 3 monitors, headphones on, fingers flying across his keyboard. I tapped him on the shoulder, and he startled before recognizing me. Amelia, hey, what brings you down to the dungeon? He removed his headphones, smiling. Need to talk? Private? I nodded toward the small meeting rooms at the edge of the floor. His expression grew serious. Sure thing. Once inside the room, I closed the door and got straight to the point. I'm being pushed out. Noah's eyebrows shot up. What? That's insane. You're practically the backbone of the product division. Jessica Winters is the new director of product strategy. Your intern, the one who asked if the cloud was an actual cloud? Despite everything, I laughed. That was 2 years ago. She's learned a lot since then. Still, Noah shook his head. That's messed up. What are you going to do? I'm leaving, but not quietly. Noah studied me for a moment, then leaned forward. What do you need from me? Access to the pre-IPO code repository, the one with all the last-minute fixes for the demo system. His eyes widened. Amelia, I'm not going to sabotage anything. Noah, I just need to document some things before I go. For my own records. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did need documentation. Documentation of all the corners that had been cut to make the IPO demo look flawless. Noah hesitated. I don't know. Remember the Thornton account? I said quietly. I took the fall for you. I never asked for anything in return, until now. He sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. Fine, but I'm not giving you right access. Read only. That's all I need. Noah pulled out his laptop and typed rapidly for a few minutes. There, I've added you as a reviewer. It'll expire in 48 hours automatically. Perfect, thank you, Noah. As I stood to leave, he caught my arm. Amelia, whatever you're planning, be careful. The company's on edge with the IPO coming. Security's watching everything. I smiled. I'm always careful. What I didn't tell Noah was that being careful wasn't part of my plan anymore. That evening, I stayed late at the office, waiting until most people had left. At 8:30 p.m., I made my way to the executive floor again, this time heading for the office of Raymond Walsh, Chief Financial Officer. Unlike Mira, Raymond was not my ally. In fact, he had been trying to reduce the product development budget for years, arguing that innovation should take a back seat to profitability. We had clashed multiple times in executive meetings. His assistant was gone for the day, but I knew Raymond would still be there. He always worked late, a fact I had used to time my visit perfectly. I knocked on his door. Come in, he called, not looking up from his computer as I entered. When he finally raised his head, surprise registered on his face. Amelia, what brings you here this late? We need to talk about the IPO presentation, I said, closing the door behind me. Raymond's expression hardened. That's not really your concern anymore, is it? I heard about the reorganization. That's precisely why we need to talk. I sat down across from him without being invited. There are some discrepancies in the product roadmap that Jessica included in the investor materials. That got his attention. If there was one thing Raymond feared more than missing profit targets, it was SEC scrutiny. What kind of discrepancies? Timeline issues, development milestones that are listed as completed when they're still in progress. Feature promises that engineering says are months away, not weeks. His face paled slightly. How bad? Bad enough that if investors asked the right questions during the roadshow, we could have a problem. Raymond removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Why are you bringing this to me and not Derek or Jessica? Because Derek is the one who insisted these features be included in the timeline, despite my objections. And Jessica doesn't know enough to understand what's missing. And you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart, after being demoted? His eyes narrowed with suspicion. I leaned forward. I've spent 7 years building Helios. I don't want to see it implode because of short-sighted decisions. Plus, when this inevitably blows up, I don't want my name anywhere near it. Raymond studied me for a long moment. What exactly do you want? Amelia. I want to fix the presentation before the roadshow begins, but I need access to the investor deck and supporting materials. Those are confidential documents at this stage. Then I can't help you. I stood as if to leave. Wait. Raymond sighed heavily. I'll have my assistant send you the relevant sections tomorrow morning, but any changes need to be reviewed by the executive team before they're implemented. Of course, I agreed smoothly. I'm just trying to help. As I left Raymond's office, I allowed myself a small smile. The CFO had just given me official access to the most sensitive pre-IPO documents. I now had visibility into how the company was presenting itself to potential investors, and where the vulnerabilities in that narrative existed. Phase 2, complete. The next morning, Raymond's assistant delivered a secure link to the IPO materials as promised. I spent 3 hours combing through them, identifying every exaggeration, every optimistic timeline, every feature that existed more in marketing's imagination than in actual code. I didn't change anything, not yet. I simply made notes, building my ammunition supply. At 11:30 a.m., Derek stopped by my new, smaller office. It had taken less than 48 hours for them to move me from my corner space to an interior room without windows. How's the transition going? He asked, not bothering to sit down. Smoothly. Jessica is catching on quickly. Another lie? Jessica was floundering, but revealing that served no purpose yet. Good. He seemed distracted. Listen, Raymond mentioned you had some concerns about the product roadmap in the investor materials. Just a few inconsistencies I noticed, nothing major. I kept my tone casual. I've sent him my notes. Derek frowned. In the future, those concerns should come to me or Jessica first. We have a chain of command for a reason. Of course, I'm still adjusting to the new structure. He nodded, apparently satisfied with my acquiescence. The executive team is meeting with the IPO underwriters this afternoon. We'll review any suggested changes then. Will Jessica be there? I asked innocently. Yes, as the new product director. She'll be presenting the roadmap section. Perfect. That makes sense. I'm sure she'll do great. As soon as Derek left, I sent a carefully crafted email to Jessica. Jessica, I heard you'll be presenting the product roadmap to the underwriters today. There are some technical details about the Nexus API integration that might come up. I've prepared some notes to help you address any questions. Let me know if you'd like to review them before the meeting. Amelia. 17 minutes later, she appeared at my door, looking slightly frantic. Do you have time to go over those notes now? The meeting's at 2, and I'm still trying to digest everything from yesterday. Of course, I said, pulling up a document I'd prepared specifically for this moment. Let's focus on the most likely questions. For the next 45 minutes, I fed Jessica a mixture of accurate information and subtle misinformation. Nothing that would be immediately identifiable as wrong, but enough to make her sound uncertain and underprepared if pressed on specific details. The most important thing, I concluded, is to emphasize that the core functionality is stable and market-ready. If they ask about the extended features, just say they're being finalized for the post-IPO release cycle. Jessica nodded, scribbling notes. Got it. Stable core, extended features in progress. Exactly. You'll do fine. She gave me a grateful smile. Thanks, Amelia. I really appreciate your help. I watched her hurry away, my expression neutral until she was out of sight. Then I turned to my computer and sent a brief email to an address few at Helios knew existed. We should talk, usual place, 7 p.m. The response came back almost immediately. I'll be there. The Blind Tiger was a small, dimly lit bar 12 blocks from Helios headquarters. It was far enough away that we were unlikely to run into colleagues, but close enough to be convenient. I arrived at 6:45 p.m. and took a booth in the back. At precisely 7:00, Elliot Vance slid into the seat across from me, former head of security at Helios until 6 months ago, when he had been let go as part of a cost optimization initiative, a decision he had not taken well. Amelia Zhao, he said, signaling the server for a drink. I wondered when I'd hear from you. It's been a while. I agreed. How's the consulting business? Lucrative. Turns out companies will pay a premium for someone who knows how to find their security holes. He studied me. But I doubt you asked me here to check on my career progress. The server delivered his whiskey and refilled my wine. When she left, I leaned forward. Helios is going public in 3 weeks. Elliot took a sip of his drink. I'm aware. It's all over the financial news. They've demoted me and promoted my former intern to take my place. He raised an eyebrow. That seems unwise. You built half their systems. More than half, I corrected. And yes, it was unwise, especially given what I know. And what exactly do you know, Amelia? I slid a USB drive across the table. Everything on this is factual and documented. What you do with it is up to you. Elliot didn't touch the drive. What exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing anything. I'm simply sharing information with a security professional who might find it relevant to his work. Information that could potentially impact Helios's IPO? I shrugged. Information that potential investors might find relevant to their decision-making process. Elliot finally picked up the drive, turning it over in his fingers. Why not take this to the SEC yourself? Because a whistleblower is easily identifiable. A security consultant identifying vulnerabilities is just doing his job. He pocketed the drive. And what do you get out of this arrangement? The satisfaction of knowing that the truth will come to light? Elliot laughed. Bullshit. You want revenge. I didn't deny it. Let's just say I want accountability. Fair enough. He finished his drink. I'll review what you've provided. No promises. I'm not asking for promises, just consideration. As Elliot stood to leave, he paused. You know this burns bridges, right? Not just at Helios. Some bridges need to be burned. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll be in touch. After he left, I remained at the booth, finishing my wine slowly. Phase 3 was now in motion. There was no turning back. The next 2 days passed in a blur of transition meetings and strategic information leaks. I provided Jessica with enough legitimate help to maintain the appearance of cooperation, while carefully selecting which aspects of the product infrastructure remained mysterious to her. On Friday morning, I received an email from Raymond requesting my presence at an emergency meeting with the executive team at 11 a.m. The subject line simply read, Underwriter Concerns. So it begins, I thought. The executive conference room was tense when I arrived. Marcus Chen, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, looking more serious than I had seen him in months. Around him were Raymond, Derek, Mira, and Jessica, along with 2 representatives from the investment bank handling our IPO. Amelia, thank you for joining us, Marcus said, gesturing to an empty chair. We have a situation that requires your expertise. I took the seat, noting Jessica's nervous expression. How can I help? One of the bankers, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, spoke up. Ms. Zhao, we've encountered some discrepancies between the product functionality demonstrations and the technical documentation provided, specifically regarding the Nexus API integration and scalability projections. I maintained a neutral expression. What kind of discrepancies? The roadshow presentation claims the system can handle 10,000 concurrent enterprise users at launch. But the technical documentation suggests the current infrastructure is tested only to 2,500. All eyes turned to Jessica, who flushed slightly. The expansion capacity is built into the system design. We're confident the 10,000 user target is achievable. By when? The banker pressed. By... Jessica looked at me helplessly. The system as currently architected, I said carefully, can be scaled to 10,000 users, but that would require additional server deployment and load balancing configuration. The documentation reflects the current tested capacity. Raymond leaned forward. Are you saying the presentation is inaccurate? I'm saying it's aspirational rather than current. The capacity exists in theory, not in practice. The second banker, a gray-haired man with a permanent frown, Made a note. And how long would it take to make this theoretical capacity practical? 2 months with the current development team, I answered truthfully, assuming no other priorities intervene. Marcus looked troubled. The presentation indicates this capacity is already in place. That was my understanding as well, Jessica said quickly. Based on the transition documents and our discussions, I turned to her with a perfectly calibrated mix of confusion and concern. Jessica, we discussed this yesterday. I specifically mentioned that the scalability testing was still in progress. Her eyes widened slightly. I must have misunderstood. The female banker closed her portfolio. Mr. Chen, given these revelations, we need to reassess the technical readiness section of the offering. This may impact our valuation models. The room fell silent. A valuation reduction before the IPO would cost everyone, especially executives with stock options, millions. This is just one feature, Derek said, attempting damage control. The core product functionality is solid and market-proven. Perhaps, the male banker replied, but it raises questions about what other projections might be. Aspirational. Marcus's jaw tightened. We'll review the entire presentation and documentation to ensure complete accuracy. Amelia, I'd like you to lead that review. Derek started to object, but Marcus cut him off with a sharp gesture. Clearly, we need someone with comprehensive technical knowledge to verify our claims. Of course, I agreed, careful not to appear too eager. I'll start immediately. After the bankers left, Marcus turned to Jessica. What happened? She looked around the table, finding no allies. There's been a lot to absorb in a short time. I may have misinterpreted some of the technical specifications. This is unacceptable, Raymond snapped. We're weeks away from the biggest moment in this company's history, and we're presenting inaccurate information to our underwriters. It was an honest mistake, Jessica said, her voice small. A $200 million mistake, Raymond retorted. That's the valuation impact if they reduce our growth projections based on capacity constraints. Marcus raised a hand for silence. What's done is done. Amelia, how quickly can you review the entire technical presentation? I'll need the weekend, I said, and access to the engineering team to verify current capabilities. You'll have it, Derek. Make sure she gets whatever she needs. Derek nodded stiffly, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. He knew his decision to promote Jessica was now under scrutiny. As the meeting broke up, Mira caught my eye across the table. Her slight nod told me she understood exactly what was happening. I hadn't confided my plan to her, but she was too smart not to see the pattern emerging. Phase 4, underway. I spent the weekend at the office, methodically documenting every discrepancy between Helios's public claims and its technical reality. Some were minor, timeline accelerations or simplified explanations of complex features. Others were more significant, performance capabilities that existed only in prototypes, integration partnerships that were still in negotiation, security protocols that had been streamlined to speed development. None were outright lies, but collectively, they painted a picture of a company that had prioritized perception over substance in its rush to go public. By Sunday evening, I'd compiled a comprehensive report. I sent one version, diplomatic but thorough, to Marcus and the executive team. I sent another version, more detailed and explicit about the implications, to an encrypted email address Elliot had provided. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office to find it buzzing with tension. The executive floor was a flurry of activity, with people rushing between meetings. Something significant had happened. I made my way to my office, acting as if nothing was unusual. At 9:45 a.m., Mira appeared at my door. Emergency all-hands meeting at 10, she said without preamble. Marcus's orders. What's happening? Mira glanced over her shoulder before responding. The IPO timeline is being reconsidered. That's all I know officially. Her emphasis on officially told me there was more. And unofficially? Unofficially. A security analyst published a detailed assessment of Helios's infrastructure this morning. It wasn't flattering. Elliot had moved faster than I expected. How bad? Bad enough that two of the underwriters called Marcus at 6 a.m. She studied me. You wouldn't know anything about this, would you? I met her gaze steadily. I've been focused on the internal review Marcus requested. Mira didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. The meeting's in the main auditorium. Don't be late. By 10 a.m., every employee of Helios was packed into the company auditorium. The mood was tense, conversations hushed. On the stage, Marcus stood with Raymond and the company's legal counsel. Derek and Jessica were notably absent. Thank you all for coming on short notice. Marcus began, his voice grave. I need to share some significant developments regarding our IPO plans. The room fell silent. This morning, a security analysis firm published a detailed report on Helios's product infrastructure, highlighting several vulnerabilities and discrepancies between our public statements and current capabilities. Murmurs spread through the audience. As a result, our underwriters have recommended a delay in our public offering to address these concerns and ensure all our representations are fully accurate. The murmurs grew louder. A delay could mean anything from a few weeks to indefinite postponement. Additionally, Marcus continued, this situation has necessitated some immediate changes to our leadership team. Here it comes. Effective immediately. Jessica Winters will be returning to her previous role as product specialist. Derek Wellington has taken a leave of absence while we review the product development processes. I kept my expression neutral, even as satisfaction bloomed inside me. Phase 5 had succeeded beyond my expectations. During this transition period, Amelia Zhao will resume leadership of the product strategy division and work directly with me to address the issues raised in the security report. Heads turned in my direction. I nodded solemnly, as if accepting a difficult but necessary burden. After the meeting, employees gathered in small groups, speculating about what had happened and what it meant for the company's future. I remained apart, checking my email for the message I knew would come. It arrived at 11:17 a.m. from Marcus. My office, noon. Marcus's corner office offered panoramic views of the city, but he wasn't admiring the scenery when I entered. He stood by his desk, reading from a tablet, his expression unreadable. Close the door, he said without looking up. I did as instructed and took a seat without being invited. Do you know what this is? He held up the tablet. I assume it's the security report published this morning. It is, remarkably detailed. The author seems to have intimate knowledge of our systems, almost as if they had access to internal documentation. I met his gaze steadily. That would be concerning. Indeed. He set the tablet down and sat across from me. What's even more concerning is that many of the vulnerabilities highlighted in this report are exactly the same ones you documented in your internal review this weekend. I'm thorough. Yes, you are. Marcus leaned back, studying me. Did you know that before joining Helios, I spent 5 years in competitive intelligence? I developed an expertise in recognizing patterns and connecting dots. I remained silent, waiting. For instance, he continued, I find it interesting that this report appeared exactly 3 days after you were removed from your director position, and that it focuses primarily on systems you personally developed or oversaw. That's hardly surprising. I've been responsible for most of our core architecture for 7 years. Marcus nodded slowly. And I suppose it's also coincidence that the author of this report previously consulted with Elliot Vance, our former head of security and your longtime ally? So he had traced it back further than I expected. Impressive. I can't speak to who wrote the report or their connections, I said carefully. Can't or won't. Marcus stood and walked to the window, his back to me. Let me be direct, Amelia. I know what you did. The question is why I shouldn't fire you immediately. I had anticipated this moment and prepared accordingly, because firing me would raise questions you can't afford to answer right now. Questions about why your most experienced product leader was demoted in favor of an inexperienced relative of a board member just weeks before your IPO. Questions about why security vulnerabilities were ignored in the rush to go public. Questions that would make this morning's report look like a minor inconvenience. Marcus turned, his expression calculating rather than angry. You engineered this entire situation. The underwriter meeting, Jessica's failure, the leaked report, all of it. I simply ensured that the truth came to light. Nothing in that report is false. No, but the timing was deliberate, designed for maximum impact. He returned to his seat. You could have raised these concerns internally. Would they have been addressed, or would I have been further sidelined as a troublemaker? Marcus was silent for a moment. Derek made the decision to promote Jessica, not me, and you allowed it. Despite knowing my contributions to this company, you stood by while I was pushed aside after 7 years of loyalty. Business decisions aren't always fair, Amelia. You know that. Indeed, just as you know that I'm now your only hope of salvaging this IPO. The tension in the room shifted as Marcus recognized the new power dynamic. He was CEO, but I held the knowledge necessary to repair the damage I had carefully orchestrated. What do you want? He asked finally. Reinstatement as Director of Product Strategy, reporting directly to you, not Derek. A significant equity adjustment to compensate for the attempted demotion, and a public acknowledgement of my role in building Helios's core technology. That's a steep price for cleaning up a mess you created. I stood, gathering my things. Alternatively, I can submit my resignation effective immediately. And you can explain to the board and underwriters why your only remaining product expert with comprehensive system knowledge quit during your IPO crisis. Marcus's jaw tightened. He was trapped, and he knew it. I'll need to discuss the equity adjustment with Raymond. Of course, I'll expect the paperwork by end of day tomorrow. And Marcus? I paused at the door. When the IPO eventually proceeds, I expect my contributions to be appropriately highlighted in all investor materials. Is there anything else, Amelia? His voice was controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. Yes, Jessica returns to her original role as Junior Product Specialist, not Product Specialist, and Derek's leave of absence becomes permanent. You're overreaching. Am I? The report didn't just expose technical vulnerabilities, it highlighted leadership failures. Someone needs to be held accountable. Marcus and I locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. Finally, he nodded once. I'll consider your requests. But remember, revenge is a short-term satisfaction. We still have a company to run. I'm counting on it, I replied. After all, my stock options will be worth significantly more once we address these issues properly. As I walked out of his office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The game wasn't over, corporate politics never truly ends, but I had successfully shifted the balance of power. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's forcing them to recognize your value on your own terms. The next 6 weeks were intense. The IPO was officially delayed by 3 months to address the technical optimizations identified in our internal review. The press speculated about the reasons, but the company maintained that it was a strategic decision to enhance product stability. Derek's leave of absence became a formal separation 2 weeks after the all-hands meeting. Jessica was quietly moved back to her previous team. Her brief promotion explained away as a developmental rotation. Lawrence Keller, her uncle on the board, made no public comments, but his presence at board meetings became less frequent. I worked 14-hour days leading the technical remediation efforts, addressing the vulnerabilities I had exposed and implementing the improvements I had advocated for years. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was fixing problems I had strategically revealed, consolidating my position with every solution. Raymond, who had initially resisted my equity demands, became more accommodating after I identified several financial projections that needed recalibration before we could face investors again. Mira, who had suspected my involvement from the beginning, became my closest ally in the executive team, appreciating my technical leadership even if she questioned my methods. 3 months later, when Helios finally went public, the offering was oversubscribed. The stock opened 40% above the target price and continued to climb. The security concerns had been transformed into a narrative about the company's commitment to technical excellence and transparency. My name featured prominently in the investor materials as the architect of Helios's core technology. As I stood on the balcony overlooking the trading floor, watching the stock ticker display our successful debut, Marcus appeared beside me. "Congratulations," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. "You got what you wanted." "We all did," I replied, accepting the glass. "A successful IPO, a stronger product, and a more honest company." He gave me a knowing look. "Was it worth it, the risk you took?" I considered the question. The past months had been exhausting, the stress enormous, the politics complex. But standing here now, respected and validated, with my contribution acknowledged and my position secure, there was only one answer. "Every moment," I said, raising my glass in a toast, "to calculated risks." Marcus clinked his glass against mine. "And to never underestimating Amelia Zhao?" I smiled, watching the numbers climb on the stock ticker. In the corporate world, power isn't given, it's taken. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to rebuild it on your own terms. As for Jessica, last I heard, she was thriving in her product specialist role, humbled by her brief and disastrous promotion. She even stopped by my office occasionally to ask for guidance, unaware that she had been a pawn in a game much larger than herself. Derek, however, was less fortunate. Word of his failed leadership at Helios followed him, making executive positions hard to come by. He eventually landed at a struggling startup 3 steps down from Helios in prestige and compensation. Sometimes, karma doesn't need engineering after all. 6 months after the IPO, I received a text message from Elliot Vance. "Worth it?" Attached was a screenshot of Helios's stock price, now double its opening value. I replied with a single word: "Absolutely." In the end, they hadn't just promoted my intern over me, they had underestimated what I was capable of when betrayed. It's a mistake no one at Helios would ever make again. The corner office I now occupied, larger than Derek's had been, offered a perfect view of the city skyline. On my desk sat a small crystal paperweight, a gift from Mira after the successful IPO. Etched into it was a simple phrase: "The best revenge is massive success." Indeed it is. But sometimes, the path to that success requires a match and the willingness to light the fire yourself.